I, 32, female, have been married to my husband Dan, 35, male, for 5 years now. We've always had a solid relationship built on trust, mutual respect, and open communication. 3 years ago, we made a joint decision that I would become a stay-at-home wife after I was diagnosed with a chronic condition that made working a regular 9 to 5 job extremely difficult. Dan has a great job in tech that allows him to support us comfortably, and I manage our household, take care of our 2 dogs, and run a small online crafting business that brings in some extra money. Our financial arrangement has always been transparent. We have a joint account for household expenses, separate personal accounts, and a shared savings account that we both contribute to according to our abilities. Dan puts in the majority since he earns more, but we both have equal say in how the money gets spent. This system has worked wonderfully for us, and we've never had issues until my mother-in-law, Brenda, decided to insert herself into our financial business. Brenda's always been a bit intrusive. When Dan and I first got together, she would constantly call him to check in, aka interrogate him about our relationship. After we got married, she would show up unannounced at our house with furniture or decor that she thought would improve our home. Dan has always been good about setting boundaries with her, but he also tries to maintain a good relationship since she's been alone since his father passed away 10 years ago. The current drama started about a month ago when Brenda invited Dan out for lunch. Just the two of them. According to Dan, everything seemed normal until dessert arrived. That's when she started questioning our financial setup, asking if he was really okay with supporting me while I did basically nothing all day. She expressed concern that I might be taking advantage of him and suggested that as a stay-at-home wife with no kids, I was essentially on a permanent vacation while he worked hard. Dan defended me, explaining my health condition and how much I contribute to our household. He also told her about my small business, which she dismissed as just a hobby. Then came the real bombshell. Brenda suggested that Dan should start keeping more of his money in a separate account that I couldn't access because she was worried I was hoarding money for myself in case I decided to leave him someday. My husband was understandably shocked and immediately shut down this conversation. He told her that our financial arrangements were our business and that he trusted me completely. He also reminded her that I had never given either of us any reason to doubt my commitment to our marriage. Brenda backpedaled a bit, saying she was just looking out for her son, but the damage was done. Dan told me everything as soon as he got home. We were both upset, but decided to give Brenda some space to cool off. We figured she'd eventually realize she had overstepped and would apologize. How wrong we were. A week later, Dan received a call from his sister Kelly, 30, female. Kelly's been living with roommates in a not so great part of town, but recently found what she called her dream apartment in a much nicer area. The only problem, it was way out of her price range. Kelly called to ask if Dan could help with the security deposit and first month's rent, which came to about $4,000. Now, Dan and Kelly have always been close, and he's helped her out financially in the past for smaller things. But $4,000 is a significant amount. Dan told her he'd need to think about it and discuss it with me before making any promises. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Ryan, 26, male, had been going through a tough time. He'd lost his job during the pandemic and had racked up some credit card debt trying to stay afloat. He finally found stable employment again, but was struggling with high interest debt that was keeping him in a cycle of minimum payments. Ryan never asked us for help, but I knew from our conversations that he was stressed about his financial situation. When Dan and I sat down to discuss Kelly's request, I brought up Ryan's situation as well. We looked at our savings and realized we could help one of them substantially, but not both, at least not right away. After a lot of discussion, we decided to help Ryan pay off his high interest debt, about $3,800, because it would have a more immediate positive impact on his situation. Kelly, while disappointed, had a stable job and could either continue looking for a more affordable place or save up a bit longer for her dream apartment. Dan called Kelly to explain our decision. He was honest about why we chose to help Ryan and assured her that we'd be happy to help her with a more affordable housing option or revisit the dream apartment situation in a few months when our savings had recovered a bit. Kelly seemed to understand, but the next day, all hell broke loose. Brenda called Dan, absolutely furious. She accused him of choosing my family over his own and demanded to know why he was wasting money on my irresponsible brother instead of helping his sister get a nice place to live. She also circled back to her previous concerns, saying this proved I was manipulating him and controlling his money. Dan was firm with her, explaining that it was our decision, not just mine, that we felt helping someone get out of debt was more urgent than funding someone else's luxury apartment. He also told her that if she couldn't respect our decisions as a married couple, she would need to back off. Brenda did not back off. Instead, she went on a rampage, calling other family members to complain about how I was controlling her son and stealing from their family. She even called my parents, who she's met maybe 3 times at family events, to tell them they should be ashamed of raising a daughter who would use her husband's money to support her deadbeat brother instead of her husband's sister. So here we are. Dan is standing firm on our decision and has told his mother that her behavior is unacceptable. I'm grateful for his support, but feeling guilty that I've somehow become the source of conflict between him and his family. My brother is incredibly grateful for our help, but also feels terrible about the drama it's caused. Kelly seems caught in the middle, not wanting to upset her mother, but also understanding our reasoning. And Brenda is apparently having a complete meltdown, threatening to never speak to Dan again if he goes through with her helping my brother. I guess I'm posting this to ask, are we the a-holes here? Should we have prioritized Kelly's apartment over my brother's debt? And how do we deal with Brenda's manipulation attempts going forward? Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for the overwhelming support and advice. I honestly didn't expect this post to get so much attention, but reading your comments has been incredibly validating and helpful during this stressful time. A lot has happened in the past few days, so I wanted to provide an update. The day after I posted, Dan and I transferred the money to my brother Ryan to pay off his credit card debt. Ryan was moved to tears and promised to pay us back eventually, though we assured him there was no rush and he should focus on building his emergency fund first. He's already noticed a significant improvement in his mental health just knowing he's not drowning in high interest debt anymore. As for the family drama, it's gotten both better and worse, if that makes sense. Let's start with Kelly. The day after my post, she called Dan and asked if they could meet for coffee without Brenda's knowledge. During their meeting, Kelly admitted that while she was initially disappointed about the apartment, she was more upset about how our mother-in-law was handling the situation. She revealed that Brenda had actually been pushing her to ask Dan for money for months, even before she found the dream apartment. According to Kelly, Brenda had been telling her that as Dan's sister, she was entitled to his financial support, especially since he was wasting money supporting a wife who doesn't work. Kelly apologized for getting caught up in Brenda's manipulation and admitted that the apartment was actually well beyond what she could reasonably afford, even with the help for the initial costs. She has been hesitant about asking for money in the first place, but felt pressured by Brenda. Dan assured her there was no hard feelings and that we'd still be happy to help her find a more substantial living situation when she was ready. The most shocking revelation from their conversation was that Brenda had apparently been planning this for months as a test to see if Dan would prioritize his real family over me and my family. Kelly felt terrible about being used as a pawn in her mother's game and promised to stand with us against Brenda's manipulation going forward. Now for the worst part, Brenda's reaction to our decision to help Ryan. 2 days ago, Brenda showed up at our house unannounced while Dan was at work. I was in the middle of preparing a bulk order for my online shop when the doorbell rang incessantly. When I opened the door, Brenda pushed past me into our home, already in mid-tirade about how I was ruining her family. For nearly 20 minutes, she stood in our living room listing all the ways I had changed her son. From convincing him to move across town, we wanted a house with a bigger yard for the dogs, to turning him against his family. We literally see them at every holiday. She claimed that before me, Dan would have never chosen to help some random guy over his own sister. When I pointed out that Ryan wasn't some random guy but my brother, and that Dan had made the decision jointly with me, she scoffed and said I had clearly brainwashed him. The breaking point came when she started criticizing my health condition, implying that I was exaggerating my symptoms to avoid working and live off her son. That's when I finally lost my cool. I told her that she needed to leave our home immediately, and that if she had concerns about Dan's decisions, she should talk to him directly instead of ambushing me when I was alone. Brenda refused to leave, saying she wouldn't go until I admitted that I was manipulating Dan. At that point, I told her that if she didn't leave voluntarily, I would call the police and report her for trespassing. That finally got her to leave, but not before she called me several choice names and promised this wasn't over. I called Dan immediately after she left, shaking and upset. He came home early from work and spent the rest of the day with me, making sure I was okay. He was furious when he heard what his mother had said, especially about my health condition. After calming down, he decided to call Brenda directly to address her behavior. That conversation did not go well. Brenda doubled down on everything she said to me and added that she was disappointed in the man Dan had become. She claimed that his father would be ashamed of him for abandoning his real family for his wife's family. Dan, who idolized his late father, was deeply hurt by the comment. He ended the call by telling Brenda that until she could respect his marriage and his choices, he would be taking a break from communicating with her. The fallout from the conversation has spread throughout Dan's extended family. Some relatives have reached out to express their support for our decision. Others are siding with Brenda, claiming that we're being too harsh on a lonely widow who just wants to be the best for her children. Dan's aunt even suggested his father's death had made Brenda overprotective of her children, as if that excused her behavior. Through all of this, Dan has remained steadfast in his support of me and our decision to help my brother. He made it clear to everyone that we are a partnership, and attacks on me are attacks on both of us. I'm incredibly grateful for his strength and loyalty, but I also worry about the long-term impact this may have on his relationship with his mother and some of his extended family. On a positive note, my small business has been a significant uptick in orders this week, which has been a welcome distraction from the family drama. Dan has been helping me package orders in the evenings, and we've been using that time to process everything that happened and reaffirm our commitment to each other and our shared values. I'm still not sure how this will all shake out in the long run, but I feel more confident knowing that Dan and I are on the same page. We're planning to take some time this weekend to discuss boundaries moving forward and how to handle future interactions with Brenda if, when they occur. Thanks again for all your support and advice. It's truly helped me feel less crazy and more validated in standing up for myself and our marriage. Update 2. Hello again, everyone. First, thank you all for the continued support and advice. Your comments and messages have been a real lifeline during this incredibly stressful time. As I mentioned in my last update, Dan and I plan to take some time over the weekend to discuss boundaries and future interactions with Brenda. We ended up having that conversation during a long hike with our dogs at a nearby state park away from phones and distractions. The change of scenery helped clear our heads, and we came to some important decisions. We both agree that while we want to maintain a relationship with Dan's family, including eventually reconciling with Brenda, if possible, we need to establish firm boundaries to protect our marriage and mental health. Dan decided I write a detailed email to Brenda explaining exactly why her behavior was unacceptable and what would need to change before we could resume regular contact. He spent several hours drafting it, wanting to be clear but not cruel, and sent it Sunday evening. In the email, Dan explained that our financial decisions are made jointly as a married couple and that neither of us has more say than the other, regardless of who earns more. He addressed her concerns about me hoarding money, providing her with some context about how we actually manage our finances, without giving specific numbers, of course. He also firmly stated that her treatment of me, especially coming to our home and harassing me when I was alone, was completely unacceptable and would not be tolerated under any circumstances. He ended the email by saying that he loves her and wants her in our lives, but only if she can respect our marriage and our autonomy as adults. He suggested she might benefit from talking to someone professionally about her fears and concerns, as her reaction seemed disproportionate to the situation at hand. We didn't expect an immediate response, so we were surprised when Brenda called Dan just an hour after he sent the email. Dan put the call on speaker so I could hear, with Brenda's knowledge. The conversation started with Brenda in tears, saying she felt attacked by the email and couldn't believe her own son would speak to her that way. Dan remained calm and reiterated the main points from his email, emphasizing that this was about behavior, not about us not loving her. After the initial defensiveness, something unexpected happened. Brenda actually started to open up about some of her underlying fears. She admitted that she's been increasingly anxious about her financial future as she gets older. Her late husband's pension doesn't go as far as it used to with inflation, and she's been worried about becoming a burden on her children. She revealed that part of her motivation for wanting Dan to help Kelly with her apartment was that Brenda has been supplementing Kelly's rent for years and wanted to stop so that she could build her own retirement savings. This was news to Dan. He had no idea his mother had been financially supporting Kelly to this extent. Apparently, Kelly has struggled to find well-paying work despite her college degree, and Brenda has been quietly helping her make ends meet rather than letting her move back home or find a more affordable living situation. While this context helped us understand Brenda's behavior a bit better, Dan made it clear that it didn't excuse how she treated me or her attempts to manipulate our financial decisions. He suggested that instead of trying to secretly redirect money to help Kelly, Brenda should have been honest with the situation and asked for help directly. The conversation ended with Brenda agreeing to respect our boundaries going forward and promising to apologize to me directly for her behavior at our house. She also agreed to consider talking to someone professionally about her anxiety around money and aging, which was a huge step for her. The next day, I received a text from Brenda asking if she could come by to talk. Dan couldn't get off work, and I was hesitant to meet with her alone. I suggested meeting at a coffee shop near our house instead, and she agreed. Our meeting was tense at first. Brenda seemed uncomfortable and kept looking around as if worried someone might overhear us. Eventually, she produced a handwritten note, an actual old school apology letter. She asked me to read it there and then and said we could talk after. The letter was surprisingly thoughtful. She apologized specifically for coming to our house and saying hurtful things about my health condition and my relationship with Dan. She acknowledged that she had been wrong to try to interfere in our financial decisions and wrong to imply that I was somehow manipulating her son. She also apologized for contacting my parents and spreading rumors among the family. After I read the letter, Brenda explained that writing things down helps her organize her thoughts when she's emotional. She said she'd been doing a lot of reflection since her conversation with Dan and realized that her fears about her own financial security had been projecting onto her child's situation. She admitted that she'd been especially hard on me because she was jealous of the close relationship I have with Dan and worried about losing her place in life. While I appreciate her honesty and apology, I was still cautious. I thanked her for the letter and for meeting with me, and told her that rebuilding trust would take time. She seemed to understand and didn't push for immediate forgiveness, which I took as a positive sign. On the Kelly front, Dan has had several conversations with his sister about her financial situation. Turns out she's been unemployed for years, working part-time at a job related to her degree, but not making enough to support herself fully. With Brenda's help, she's been just barely scraping by, but management isn't sustainable for either of them. Dan has offered to help Kelly update her resume and has connected her with some contacts in his professional network who might know of job opportunities more suited to her qualifications. He's also suggested that once she finds more stable employment, we could revisit the possibility of helping with her housing, though probably not the dream apartment she started this whole situation with. As for my brother Ryan, he's doing great. Being free from credit card debt has already allowed him to start building a small emergency fund, and he's feeling much more optimistic about his future. He's offered to help us with some home improvement projects as a way of showing his gratitude, which we've happily accepted. In a strange way, this whole ordeal has brought some hidden issues to light that might have continued festering otherwise. We're still navigating the aftermath, but I feel like we're moving in a positive direction. Dan and I are stronger than ever, and while his relationship with his mother is still fragile, there's a path forward that doesn't involve completely cutting her out of our lives. I'll post another update if anything significant changes, but for now, we're cautiously optimistic that the worst of this situation is behind us. Update 3. Hello again, everyone. This will likely be my final update on this situation. As things have mostly resolved in ways I wouldn't have predicted when I first posted here. The past week has brought significant developments in our family dynamics. After Brenda's apology and our coffee shop meeting, I remained cautiously optimistic but realistic about how things might progress. I've read enough stories on this subreddit to know that one apology doesn't necessarily signal permanent change, but I'm pleased to report that Brenda has consistently respected our boundaries and made genuine efforts to rebuild trust. 3 days after our coffee shop meeting, Brenda invited Dan and me to dinner at her house. This was noteworthy because she had never invited just the two of us before. These invitations typically included Kelly or other family members. We accepted but agreed beforehand that we would leave immediately if she started bringing up past issues or attempted to steer the conversation towards financial matters inappropriately. The dinner was surprisingly pleasant and drama-free. Brenda prepared several of Dan's favorite dishes and made a dessert that accommodated my dietary restrictions. A small but meaningful gesture, considering she'd previously made dismissive comments about my health conditions. Throughout the evening, she asked normal questions about our lives, my business, and our general plans without any passive aggressive remarks or loaded questions. Towards the end of the evening, Brenda shared some information that helped explain her recent change in attitude. She had taken Dan's suggestion and attended her first therapy session. She described it as uncomfortable but probably necessary, and mentioned she had scheduled additional appointments. She also revealed that after our previous conversations, she had consulted a financial advisor to assess her retirement situation, which had apparently helped address some of her anxieties about her financial future. The most significant revelation came when she brought up Kelly's situation. Brenda acknowledged that she had been enabling Kelly's financial dependence for years. She explained that she had felt guilty about working long hours when Kelly and Dan were growing up, and had compensated by solving all of Kelly's adult problems for her. Through her initial therapy session and our recent conversations, she was beginning to recognize how this approach had actually hindered Kelly's growth and independence. Brenda told us that she had decided to stop supplementing Kelly's rent and had already informed her of this decision. Instead, she offered Kelly the option to move back home temporarily while she found better employment and saved for her own place. Kelly was initially upset, but eventually agreed to the arrangement. Brenda asked if Dan and I would be willing to help Kelly with her job search and financial planning, not by providing money, but by sharing knowledge and practical advice. We agreed to this more constructive form of assistance. Dan has set up weekly video calls with Kelly to review her resume and job applications, and I've offered to share some basic financial management skills I've developed while running my small business. Kelly seems genuinely receptive to this approach and has expressed appreciation for the support that doesn't involve simply solving her problems with cash. The following weekend, we had Kelly over for dinner. The conversation was somewhat awkward at first, but eventually we had a productive discussion about her career aspirations and financial goals. Turns out she's been working in retail despite having a degree in marketing because she found the job search process overwhelming and had become comfortable with the arrangement of having her mother subsidize her living expenses. With Dan's networking help, she's already secured an interview at a marketing firm where one of his former colleagues works. As for my brother Ryan, his situation continues to improve steadily. The debt payoff has allowed him to start building a modest emergency fund, and he's picked up some freelance projects to supplement his regular income. When we met for lunch last week, he insisted on paying and expressed how much the financial assistance has reduced his stress levels. He's already created a repayment plan to eventually return the money, though we've told him there's no rush and his financial stability is more important to us. The extended family drama has largely subsided. Once Brenda stopped fueling conflicts with complaints about me and our decision, most family members moved on to other topics. A few relatives have even reached out to apologize for getting involved without understanding the full situation. Dan's aunt, who had initially been very critical of our decision, called to acknowledge that she had only heard Brenda's side of the story and shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. Perhaps the most unexpected development has been the gradual shift in my relationship with Brenda. While we're certainly not best friends, there's a new level of basic respect between us that wasn't present before. Last weekend, she called me directly, not Dan, to ask if I'd be willing to help her set up an online shop for her knitting project, something she's considering as a retirement activity that could generate some supplemental income. We spent a few hours on Saturday setting up a basic website, and the interaction felt reasonably comfortable and straightforward. Dan has commented on the reduced tension, noting how much less stress he feels knowing his mother and wife can interact without underlying hostility. He's expressed appreciation for my willingness to give his mother another chance to improve our relationship, which I was open to doing. Family relationships are important to both of us, even when they're complicated. The experience has prompted Dan and I to review our financial arrangements. We've decided to establish a specific family assistance fund separate from our regular savings, with clear parameters about what constitutes an appropriate use of those funds. This way, if similar situations arise in the future, we'll have both resources and the framework to make decisions without as much emotional stress or potential for family conflict. Yesterday, we had a follow up conversation with Brenda about long term plans. She shared that her financial advisor had helped her realize she needed to make some adjustments to ensure her retirement remains secure. She's considering downsizing from her current house to a smaller condo in the same area, which would free up some equity and reduce her monthly expenses. She asked for our thoughts, but explicitly stated she wasn't asking for financial assistance, just our opinions on whether this seemed like a reasonable plan. This kind of normal, appropriate conversation about financial matters without manipulation was refreshing. We also discussed holiday plans, which had been a source of tension in previous years due to Brenda's tendency to make last minute demands on our time. For the first time, she proactively suggested we coordinate schedules well in advance and was receptive when we explained that we typically split holidays between both families. She even suggested that for Thanksgiving this year, we could try having a joint celebration with both sides of the family, something she had previously resisted. Regarding Kelly's living situation, the arrangement with Brenda seems to be working reasonably well so far. Kelly moved back home last weekend and has established some ground rules with her mother about privacy and independence. Brenda has committed to treating Kelly as an adult roommate rather than reverting to a parent child dynamic. They've agreed this is a temporary arrangement with a target of 6 months for Kelly to find better employment and start saving for her own place. Dan and Kelly have been discussing potential career paths that might better utilize her marketing degree. She's expressed interest in digital marketing but lacks experience with the current tools and platforms. Dan suggested some online courses and certifications that could make her more competitive in the job market. And she's enrolled in two of them already. It's encouraging to see her taking proactive steps towards financial independence rather than just looking for another form of support. As for my small business, it's continuing to grow steadily. The increased order volume has kept me busy, which has been a welcome distraction from family drama. I've been considering bringing on part-time assistant to help with packaging and shipping as the holiday season approaches. Dan has been supportive of this potential expansion, reinforcing that our financial decisions continue to be made jointly with both our interests in mind. I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post and subsequent updates. Your advice, support, and perspective helped us navigate this challenging situation more effectively than we might have otherwise. The validation I received here gave me confidence to maintain appropriate boundaries while remaining open to reconciliation when it seemed genuine. If there's one practical lesson I've learned from this experience, it's that family conflicts rarely exist in isolation from other underlying issues. Brenda's attempts to control our finances weren't really about money itself, but about her fears regarding aging, financial security, and her changing relationship with her adult children. Understanding the root causes didn't excuse her behavior, but it did help us find more constructive ways to address the actual problems rather than just treating symptoms. For others dealing with difficult in laws or family members, my advice would be to establish clear boundaries while remaining open to understanding what might be driving problematic behavior. And perhaps, most importantly, present a united front with your partner. Dan's consistent support and our commitment to making decisions together as a team were fundamental to navigating this situation and ultimately improving our family dynamics. I don't know what the future holds, and I remain realistically cautious rather than naively optimistic. But the current trajectory seems positive. We'll continue to maintain appropriate boundaries while giving Brenda the opportunity to demonstrate that these changes are lasting. Thank you all again for being part of this journey with us. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.